Hello fellow humans, and today I want to have a look at the T110E5 because it has been adjusted in update 9.1. However, nothing really happened to it. It didn't get buffed, which it should have been, and it remains a vehicle that used to be absolutely dominant, now not so much. However, it still has some strengths to it if you know what you're doing. Let's have a look whether this tank's worth getting. Let's have a look at the stats of the E5, and the one thing that you can immediately see is that it has horrible DPM for its alpha damage. Even an autoloader like a T57 Heavy has 3000, while something like a 113, which has higher alpha damage, has 1000 DPM more. So that is definitely not very good here in terms of the gun. However, in terms of the other accuracy and aim time, it is very good. You have 8 degrees of gun depression, which is also very nice. The Type 71, very similar gun right here. However, the Type 71's gun is massively worse in terms of dispersion and aim time right here. And the E5's gun is among the most accurate of the Tier 10 heavy tanks, which is a great thing to have, obviously. However, in terms of gun depression, it does lose out to the Chieftain. And then we have the mobility, which is also slightly above average. It's somewhere on par with a 113, with, funnily enough, lower traverse speed than the 113 now, which is just doesn't make sense, but wargaming. And so that's perfectly fine. So now we have two problems left. It's not the weapon handling, it's not the mobility, it's definitely the firepower. Then we have the armor. And you can kind of see that this tank's not doing any well down here. Now, obviously, these stats are influenced by a lot of different factors that are never 100% accurate. You can clearly see that the E5 is the worst performer right here, and that the Type is performing better for one simple reason, and that is because it's harder to fight. Now, while the Type 71 has a very strong front plate that you can wiggle back and forth and make yourself essentially impenetrable and become the noob's nightmare, the T125, while still having strong front armor, it doesn't really have that big of an advantage there. So it has the same relatively weak gun as the Type 71, while not really having that much armor to back it up, especially on the front. Now, obviously, you have the 8 degrees of gun temperature, which means you can put this vehicle hull down, which is very nice. You can't really get penned in a turret for the most part. There are a few exceptions, as you can see along this line here, but those are pretty damn hard to hit. Now, obviously, the lower plate is a weak spot like on any tank. Type 71's lower plate is very small. That's what makes that tank so good, despite its absolutely miserable gun compared to what else Tier 10s have to offer. The E5 is just basically meh at pretty much everything, and that's the problem with this tank. Now let's have a look at the loader of the vehicle. Very standard consumables. You can use the reactive armor instead of adrenaline if you want to. I wouldn't recommend it. Provisions, very standard. Food and fuel, always use those two, and then you can decide between sandbag armor and protective kit. For the E5, I don't think it's really that vulnerable to crew damage or fire, so I will go with a sandbag armor there. Ammo, diagonal line, very simple right there. And then in terms of the equipment, that's what I use. Now, it has very low DPM already. Now, 2,558, as you can see right there. That's not too bad, you know, but for 400 alpha damage, that is miserable in Tier 10. So I want to make sure that every shot I take is going to penetrate, and 374mm of heat pen is definitely going to go through everything. So you're going to use calibrator on this vehicle, because I feel like the DPM is so low that boosting it doesn't really make any sense. If it were 2,800, then it would definitely go for the gun armor, but that's too low. Now, refined gun. It's already a very accurate gun, as you see. That together with the gun laying drive. No, you would never ever use supercharger on anything besides the tank destroyer. And then refined gun, and then the rest is very much standard as well. So I'm using the enhanced armor to get the turret armor up a bit, and I already have the sandbag armor, so I don't really need the extra 100 hit points there. I use this to sort of try and bump the turret armor up a bit and the upper plate, so that is less likely to be penned. However, whichever one you use of these two is generally up to you. Unless it's a tank with no armor, it really doesn't matter which one of the two you use. Now, here we go with the T110E5 on Molendyke, and I probably just offended every Dutch person that exists, but... or not, I don't know. So, let's see what we can do. Ideally, you want to put this thing in a hull-down position, right? You want to be able to take shots when the enemy can't shoot at you, because that's the only chance you have at this point to get something out of this vehicle. Obviously, if you're a very good player, you're obviously going to do well with it. Duh. Now, the point is, with this tank, you have a problem. An IS-7 has 60 more alpha damage, but reloads in just about the same time frame, which means you can't shoot twice. like a Chieftain can, for example, like a 113 can. You can't shoot twice for the IS-7 to shoot once, which means you need to be able to shoot smarter than the IS-7 and outsmart him and peek him when he's not looking, right? So at that point, you already have a problem because you need to be the better player because you're playing a worse tank. Now, the E5's cupola, as you can see right there, is very small, and that's why on this vehicle I am using calibrated and the reticle calibration, because that makes this vehicle very accurate and makes it very good to sync those shots that you have. Now, ideally, it has 10 seconds like this with the calibrated. If I were to use calibrated, I think it should have about 9.2. That would be a lot better for this tank, certainly. But that's how it is, unfortunately, now. As you already saw earlier, it is, by those statistics, it is the worst performing one out of the ones I showed, so there's got to be something to it, no? Okay, they're all in the city, which is good for us, because city players tend to be bad. And there we go. What is also bad is the track wheel of the T110E5, so I do not recommend ever peeking with that, because it can be pinned very easily and can be shot very easily. Now, I'm going to go and fight this guy. I know I have less hit points, but I know I'm the better player, so I don't really care. So, let's see. Let's go down here. Now, at this point, I also know that I have 2 teammates back there, so all I'm going to have to essentially do is try and get around him for long enough, and then he's going to get shot anyway. Okay, 600 HP, which means he needs 2 shots. T30 is going to YOLO me, and now I'm dead, which is unfortunate. Never mind, he didn't YOLO me. Well, he did YOLO me, just screwed up. Now, luck is also a factor in playing well. Can't deny that. And now, again, we're going to have to hide from both of them. I want to hide from the T30 more than from the E5, because the T30 is the bigger threat, because he can one-shot me, the E5 can't. So, we're going to have the shot, as you can see, right there at the side of the turret. It's not that very well armored, so you might want to keep this thing mobile, moving back and forth. And because otherwise, you're going to definitely have a problem with it. Now, there we go. 215B, not going to have that. Obviously, he might still peek around, so let's try and go on track shot. A bit too late there. Here comes the VK, and we're getting pushed. That's not good, because now all the enemies are in one place, which is not what you want to do. You never want to be the main focus of the enemy. And now we're going to see we can shoot through there. There we go. Now the E50M is going to try and go for me, so I'm going to angle for it. Nope, he's actually not going to try to kill me, which is interesting. It's a very interesting choice there from the E50M, because now the Leopard can shoot him, and he bounces off me. So it's a very interesting choice there from that Leopard, and now I'm going to have to be careful of that VK-72 as well. I do think that the VK is probably going to camp as well. He's going to shoot HE, and now I am dead. But despite that, despite just rushing that E5, I still did 4,000 damage. And that is how much a good player can still extract from a tank that isn't that great, just by having a bit of situational awareness and a very high tendency to throw. Now, as you saw in the last game, and my excellent ability to not throw while still throwing, it is still a tank that can do well in the right hands. Obviously, any tank is going to do well if you put it into the right hands and the player that knows how to play it. That's how it works. Now, the thing is with the E5, though, is for an average player, what does it have to offer? It has lower alpha damage. It has lower DPM than an IS-7 and E100. Well, it has higher DPM than E100, but yeah. So what you have here is basically you have to peak more, which means you have to be better than the enemy. You have to be more calculated than the enemy, because obviously if you aren't, then the enemy is going to trade you 1-for-1, and you're going to lose that because you don't have the alpha damage to do that. And I don't have the RNG either. Now, Type 71, he is very much trying to push me, but that's a bad idea in most cases on this map, because there are going to be tank destroyers camping in the back all the time. Now, let's finally do some damage, and see whether we can kick this off. Now, 10 shots doesn't sound too impressive. That's what you need for 4,000 damage in this vehicle, and that ain't too amazing there. Now, obviously, a good player in this vehicle is still going to do insanely well. If you know what you're doing, if you know where to look, all those kind of stuff, it will work out just about fine. However, the problem with this tank is this used to be a great beginner tank. However, with them nerfing its DPM, it now made it very dependent on the player being able to outplay the enemy, which is obviously not going to go very well, unfortunately. What I would suggest is give it its DPM back. 2,800, not slightly below that of a Chieftain. Obviously, it has more penetration than a Chieftain already, so it should have less DPM than that. but 2,800 DPM, something like that, would definitely be adequate for this thing. Not 2,400 with calibrate, or 2,550 with rammer. So, because that's one more shot per minute, basically, and it does really need that, in my opinion. What do you think about the E5? Is it fine the way it is? Should it be buffed? Are you a maniac and should it be nerfed? So, I don't know where that went, but I guess. So, let's see. Alright, now we're sitting here, 50B, E3's back there. Type's gonna reload in about 5 seconds, so we're gonna have to watch out for that. Gonna load heat already because of the type. The type's biggest weakness is heat rounds of 350 penetration and more, which is exactly what I have, which means this is not going to be too much of a problem. Now, I want to get out of the firing line here, obviously, that one. So, let's back off here. The E3 is still back there, and exactly, I want to, yep, just about avoid that. There we go. Oh, and now I have 2 tank destroyers behind me, which means all I'm going to have to do is sit on this ridgeline and wait for them to do their job, just like that. And, you know, I can see where the Foch is. I know where he's gonna go. So all I have to do is pull back and boom, problem solved. The problem is, that is 8 years of experience and a lot of awareness. This tank needs that. Otherwise, it don't do well. I'm not trying to brag here, okay? Just say it. I'm shit. Don't worry, I'm shit. I'm probably a lot more shit than other players, but anyway, let's see. Capping. Well, it's probably the Foch. Of course it is. Right, who's closest to the cap circle is the Foch. Who's the fastest to the cap circle? 62.8. Now, E3. Huh. Can shoot his cupola on the side there, so let's send that in there. 4,300 damage, which is, I'm not impressed. Yeah, both of them are one-shots. At 4,005 is gonna do what a 4,005 should never do, and that is engage an enemy tank. Ideally, in a 4,005, you want to do that as little as possible, and always sit back and let the team do the work, because if you actually try to engage someone, you're gonna die. So, heat rounds, straight through his face, nothing special about that. It still works, of course. The tank still does work. There we go, very nice. Now what we're gonna do, finish off the 62A. It does have the characteristics to be used by a very good player. However, it does lack the DPM and the adaptability to be a all-round good vehicle. And that's the sad part about it. All it needs is a bit more DPM, and this thing would be absolutely amazing. So, wargaming, how about we try it? How about we try that out and give it its DPM back and make it a bit more relevant again? Now, is it gonna break tournament? Who the hell cares about tournaments? So that's the excuse they came up with for nerfing it, because it was too much used in tournaments, and that's an ace. My gameplay is not a very good argument for my argument here of the tank not being that great. However, I would definitely buff this thing's DPM up. You know that with calibrate we are at 2,000. You know, it's 2,400 now. Put it to 650, and we're good. And then the vehicle is definitely more relevant again. What do you think? Put it in the comments. Thank you very much for watching. See you next one. Goodbye.